Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today, we're going down a rabbit hole that involves one of history's most famous figures, Napoleon Bonaparte.
Ooh, Napoleon. Color me intrigued.
Well, we're not just talking about his military campaigns or his exile. We're looking into his death and a theory that's, well, a little bit unusual.
Okay, I'm officially hooked. Lay it on me.
Did you know that some people believe that the green wallpaper in Napoleon's home might have played a role in his death?
Wait, the wallpaper? I gotta admit, that's not the first thing that springs to mind when you think about Napoleon.
Right. It sounds a bit wild, but there's actually some evidence to support this theory.
Okay, you've got my attention. Let's start with the basics then. What's the official story about how Napoleon died?
Officially, the records say he died in exile on St. Helena in 1821 from stomach cancer.
Stomach cancer, huh?
Yeah, but even back then, people were whispering about foul play, and those whispers have only gotten louder over time.
Makes sense. The guy was a larger-than-life figure, so I'm sure there were plenty of people who wanted him gone. Did he ever say anything himself about foul play?
He did. In his will, he actually wrote, "I died before my time, murdered by the English oligarchy and its hired assassin."
Wow, straight to the point. So he definitely thought something was up.
Right, whether he truly believed he was being poisoned or if it was a final act of defiance, who knows?
Yeah, but it definitely adds to the mystery.
It does. And then there's this other weird detail. When Napoleon's body was exhumed, almost 20 years after his death, it was incredibly well preserved.
Hold on, really?
Yep. Normally, a body would have decomposed a lot in that time.
You're right, that is strange.
So that, combined with Napoleon's accusations, got people thinking, could it have been arsenic?
Arsenic? Okay, now things are getting interesting. But where does the wallpaper come in?
Ah, yes, the wallpaper. So Napoleon's home on St. Helena, this place called Longwood House, was decorated with this vibrant green wallpaper. And in the 19th century, green wallpaper was super popular. But here's the catch. A lot of those green pigments were made with arsenic.
Wait, so they were literally putting arsenic on their walls? That's insane.
Pretty much, yeah.
Mm.
The type of green used in Napoleon's wallpaper was called Scheele's green, and it was known for its vivid color. But what people didn't realize at the time was that it contained a good amount of copper arsenide.
Copper arsenide, so arsenic.
Exactly.
Wow, what could possibly go wrong, right?
And to make matters worse, Longwood House was really damp, so that humidity probably made the arsenic in the wallpaper release into the air.
So, just to be clear, you're saying Napoleon was basically living in a house that was slowly poisoning him with arsenic?
This is a pretty disturbing thought, right?
Yeah, a bit creepy, to say the least.
And they actually did test the wallpaper later on.
Really? What did they find?
The sample they took from Longwood House contained a significant amount of arsenic, something like 0.12 grams per square meter.
0.12 grams, huh? Okay, now I'm really curious to know how much arsenic is considered dangerous. Because just hearing that number doesn't tell me much on its own.
Well, that's where things get even more complicated. The thing is, the toxicity of arsenic depends on how much you're exposed to and for how long.
That makes sense. So, Napoleon living in this house for years, especially with the dampness, could that have been enough to cause chronic arsenic poisoning?
It's definitely a possibility, and that's what we're going to delve into next.
And here's the thing about chronic arsenic poisoning. The symptoms can look a lot like other illnesses.
Even stomach cancer.
Exactly. Think about it. Abdominal pain, nausea, weakness. Could be a lot of things.
So back in Napoleon's time, they might not have been able to tell the difference.
Exactly. Medical diagnoses weren't what they are today. Mistaking arsenic poisoning for cancer, totally possible.
Wow, when you put it like that, it makes you wonder how many other cases throughout history could have been misdiagnosed, because arsenic was everywhere back then.
Oh, absolutely. Medicines, cosmetics, even food coloring. It was a different world.
So even if it wasn't just the wallpaper, Napoleon was probably exposed to arsenic from a bunch of different places.
Right. And that's what makes this whole thing so tricky. We're not looking at one clear cause, more like a whole bunch of factors that could have all played a part.
Speaking of other factors, you mentioned before that Napoleon was given some pretty questionable medical treatments while he was in exile. Could those have done him more harm than good?
Oh, for sure. 19th century medicine. Let's just say they didn't always get things right.
Do you have any examples?
Well, for one, they gave Napoleon regular doses of antimony.
Antimony.
Yeah, it's a metallic element, and it's pretty toxic. And on top of that, they also prescribed him mercury compounds. Back then, mercury was a common treatment for all sorts of things, but we know now how dangerous it can be.
So not only was there potential arsenic exposure from the wallpaper and who knows what else, but the treatments themselves might have been making him sicker.
It's a grim thought, isn't it? Seems like poor Napoleon was caught between a rock and a hard place.
This is a lot to unpack. So how do we explain the fact that stomach cancer ran in Napoleon's family?
Ah, good point.
Hmm.
Napoleon's father died of what was believed to be stomach cancer, so genetics definitely plays a role here.
So maybe it wasn't one or the other. Maybe it was a bit of everything.
Exactly. The arsenic exposure, his family history, and who knows, maybe even the stress of being exiled, all of that could have contributed to his declining health.
It kind of makes you realize that history isn't always clear-cut, is it?
Exactly. It's rarely a simple this caused that situation.
Even though we might not ever know for sure what killed Napoleon, I think this deep dive has shown us that the wallpaper theory is more than just a spooky story.
I agree. It really makes you think about all those everyday things that could be dangerous without us even realizing it.
Right. Like, if something as ordinary as wallpaper could have harmed an emperor, it makes you wonder what we might discover about the things in our own homes in the future.
It's a good reminder to pay attention to what's around us, even those things we take for granted.
Well, I, for one, will never look at green wallpaper the same way again.
Maybe a little caution is a good thing. But you know, what I find really fascinating about cases like this is how they make us think critically about the past.
It reminds us that we don't always have all the answers and that there's still so much to learn.
And that even centuries later, there are still mysteries out there waiting to be explored.
It really does make you think, doesn't it? Like, what things that we think are totally normal now could turn out to be dangerous down the line.
It's a fascinating thought, yeah. I mean, our understanding of the world is always changing. What we think is safe today might be a whole different story in the future.
True. So, when it comes to Napoleon and the wallpaper, I guess the question is, can we say for sure that the wallpaper played a role in his death?
Well, it's tough to say with 100% certainty that it was the main cause, or even a major one, but I think it's fair to say that it probably didn't help his health.
Right. So it sounds like the most likely explanation is that it was a combination of things: the wallpaper, the medical treatments he was given, maybe his family history, even the stress of exile, all adding up.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important thing to remember when we look back at history, especially medical history. It's rarely as simple as this one thing caused this.
It's more like a puzzle with lots of different pieces.
Exactly. You've got predispositions, circumstances, sometimes just plain bad luck. All those things can factor in.
It's kind of humbling, in a way. Even someone as powerful as Napoleon, still vulnerable to the same forces that affect all of us.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that when we're trying to understand something that happened in the past, we have to consider the historical context. What seems like a simple case of poisoning today might have been a lot more complicated back then.
Right. It's amazing how something as everyday as wallpaper can become this central piece in a historical mystery.
It is. And I think it shows how the things we surround ourselves with can really have a powerful effect on our lives, for better or worse.
Well, I can definitely say that after this deep dive, I'm going to look at green wallpaper a little differently from now on.
Maybe that's not a bad thing. But in all seriousness, I think what's so valuable about exploring cases like Napoleon's death is that it encourages us to really think critically, to question what we assume to be true, and to appreciate how complex history can be.
Totally agree. And it's a good reminder that even centuries later, there are still mysteries to solve and stories to be told.
Exactly. So, to our listeners out there, here's something to think about. The next time you come across some historical event, don't just take it at face value. Dig a little deeper, ask some questions, and you might be surprised at what you find.
That's great advice. It's been a fascinating deep dive, as always.
Mhm.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.